you guys doing tonight? And what a wonderful reminder of God's graciousness, His generosity, His goodness toward us. And if you're here and you're a guest tonight, we're so grateful you're here. There's nothing more exciting for us than to know that one more person can know how much they matter. You know, their life has meaning, has purpose, has intention. And one thing we keep learning the hard way is that people can look so put together on the outside, but they're just falling apart on the inside. And so we don't know what's going on inside of you, but we want you to know this is a safe place. It's a place where you can just be who you are. And even if you don't believe in God or ready for faith, I hope you're ready for us, because we just want to embrace you and love you and let you know that you belong here. And you don't have to wait till you believe to find unconditional love and acceptance. And we hope that environment will open up your soul for faith. Let's pray together. Father, we thank you so much that you created us for a relationship. You created us for love. And God, I know that everyone here is going through something. They all have their battles to fight and their challenges to face, the struggles that sometimes may feel bigger than they are. God, I just pray right now refreshment and strength and hope and encouragement for every person in this room. And God, I just have a sense that even though we couldn't hear them rattling, that people walked in here with chains. And God, I just have a deep sense that tonight you're going to set people free, that you're going to send us out unchained tonight. So we want to step into that and receive it and live in it. And Jesus, we thank you that you stepped into human history 2,000 years ago and gave your life on our behalf. That you died so that we could live. And you rose from the dead so that we could know that life is more powerful than death. Love is more powerful than hate. Hope is more powerful than despair. So we thank you, Jesus, and we welcome you in this place. We pray in your name. Amen and amen. Can we just thank God for tonight? You can have a seat. I have a deep sense in my spirit tonight that some of you are going to find a freedom you've been searching for a long time. That you came in with some chains that no one else can see and no one else can hear, but they're holding you down and holding you back. And I'm just absolutely convinced that tonight you're going to leave unchained. Have you ever felt like you've taken all the steps you know how to step? You know everything you think you're supposed to know. You've done everything that they told you you're supposed to do, but things are still not working. So sometimes the secret that we don't allow people to hear out loud is that you can give your life to Jesus and your life can still be disastrous. You can believe all the right things and your life would still be a mess. And there's some of you who are here and you're like, wait a minute, I've done everything I know how to do. I've crossed the line of faith. I've opened my life up to God. I've entrusted Jesus with everything, but something's still not working. And there's some of you, it hasn't been working for a long, long time. And you're not sure what's going on. Have you ever felt as if God is helping everyone else but you? You know, he's helping everyone else live out their dreams but you. He's answering everyone else's prayers but yours. And that would be okay if he wasn't answering anyone's prayers. If he wasn't helping anyone out. It would just sort of be all right if this was the struggle we're all in, but sometimes it seems like someone else has figured it out. Don't you just hate that person moves to LA to be an artist? You know, they're going to become an actor and they look like everyone else in LA. They look just like you. You're like, they're not gonna make it. They didn't even go to acting classes. They don't have any kind of like theater background. They just came on a dream, but they're a mess. Their lives are a disaster. They can't even make it through the weekend. They're going to every audition absolutely racked, their eyes bloodshot red. And then they walk into a place like Mosaic and they have a life-changing encounter with Jesus, and the next day they get a call and they go audition. They show up late. They don't even have the script memorized, and they get the job, and it's a lead in a WB show. And they go, it's amazing. God has just changed my life. I've only been here 2 months, and I have a starring role. Isn't God awesome? And you're like, not really. He's not awesome enough. He's not awesome to me. I've been here 8 years. Going to acting classes, learning how to move like an insect or a butterfly, humiliating myself. I've been going to church for 8 years. I don't even like church, but I'm hoping God will eventually see the accumulated effort I've put in. You ever felt like God's just not showing up for you? See, there's this fascinating dynamic in the scriptures that it tells us that God has these promises for us. And if you pay attention enough, these promises can be incredibly compelling. But then we have reality. And reality doesn't seem to match the description of the promises. And what I want to walk you through in this moment is how to match your reality to the promises in the scriptures. And how to begin to live the full measure of the life God created you to live. Because in the end, what I hope will happen in your life is that you will begin to live your life in the absolute freedom that God created you to live in, and that you would live your life unchained. There's this passage in Galatians chapter 4, beginning in verse 1. Paul writes these words. What I am saying is that as long as an heir is underage, he is no different from a slave, although he owns the whole estate. The heir is subject to guardians and trustees until the time set by his father. So also when we were underage, we were in slavery under the elemental spiritual forces of the world. But when the set time had fully come, God sent his son, born of a woman, born under the law, to redeem those under the law, that we might receive adoption to sonship and daughtership. Because you are his sons and daughters. God sent the Spirit of his Son into our hearts, the Spirit who calls out, Abba, Father. So you are no longer a slave, but God's child. And since you are his child, God has also made you an heir. So he begins by telling us that he says, what I'm saying to you is that as long as you're an heir, as long as an heir is underage, he will not experience the full benefit of being an heir. But this language is not language we're accustomed to. We're not all Meghan Markle who gets to marry a prince or a duke or whatever he is. He gets to marry into royalty. Now he's a part of a royal family. And you understand that they have an inheritance that they've received simply by being a part of a family. See, what the scriptures are actually telling us is that we have been brought into a very unique family. Once you cross that line of faith, once you give it your life to Jesus and entrust yourself to God, you become an heir. You become a son and daughter of God. But the problem is that we don't actually live that out. We don't experience the reality of that heirship. And so what he's telling us is that there's a gap between who we are and the life we experience. And he wants us to understand how to cross that line so that we can live the life God created us to live. He's working from an assumption. He says, what I am saying is that as long as an heir is underage, he's assuming you know that you're an heir. I love that assumption. Because I don't know about you, but I didn't know I married into royalty. I didn't know I married into a royal family. I didn't know that I was now in the bloodline to receive far more than I could ever ask or imagine. And maybe you don't know who you are. See, because what I found in my own life is that the dominant reason many of us still have chains on our lives is that we don't know who we are. And this loss and lack of identity is crippling us. So it says, you're an heir, but as long as an heir is underage, they are no different from a slave. Now that line disturbs me. I don't ever want to be described as a person who's no different than a slave. So you're an heir, but if you are underage, you're no different than a slave. Now there's some of you here, you've actually stepped into a relationship to God, you've opened up your life to Jesus, but you're still living like a slave. And you cannot figure out why you're living like a slave when you've actually opened up your life to God. And what he's telling you is that there's a reason why this is happening. Is that when you're underage, you experience this relationship as if you're a slave rather than an heir, rather than a son or daughter. He says, you are no different than a slave, although he owns the whole estate. Wow, that adds insult to injury. Even though you're the owner of everything, you live life as if you have nothing. Slaves have nothing. So I want to ask you, are you living like a slave? Are you living like a slave in your relationship to God? See, Jesus did not die on the cross so that God could be your master. He died on the cross so that God could be your father. But some of you are relating to God as if he's a master and you're the slave. And you can know you're a slave if your entire relationship with God is about guilt and shame. So you can know you're a slave if your entire relationship with God is about obedience and obligation. You can know you're a slave if you're trapped in religion and you're worried about God's judgment and condemnation, and so you're afraid of God because you're a slave and he's a master. There's a lot of us here who are still struggling with a relationship with God, and we relate to God as if we're slaves. And slaves never expect anything. They never ask for anything. They never own anything. Slaves never have anything that is theirs. So some of you are living like slaves, but you're heirs. So let me tell you why. You're still underage. You're still a child. You're still immature. You don't get the benefits of being a son or a daughter until you grow up. So are you living like a slave? The answer is grow up. Yesterday, Aaron and I were walking the dog, Thatcher, and we saw this SUV go by. And then it made an illegal U-turn, came back the other way. And we saw this woman in the driver's seat, but she was not driving. It was her about 10-year-old son who was sitting on her lap, and he was driving. He had the biggest smile. He was wide open. And when he went by, I just started waving at him, saying, way to go! I didn't cross until he was way gone. And then I looked at Aaron and I said, I remember when I used to do that with you, let you drive illegally. But we did it in open parking lots late at night, not where you could run over small children. I think it's epic. I mean, I'm not advocating breaking the law and having small children drive cars. But I'm pretty sure I know this about the mom. She would never give her son the keys and say, you can go. I took you out. He was so small he couldn't even reach the pedals by himself. He had to choose, either turn the steering wheel or push the pedals. Gas or control, one of the two. He couldn't do both. And if he came up to his mom and said, hey mom, I got this driving thing down. Can I have the SUV? I'm going to the ArcLight. Gonna pick up some friends, go to the movies. She would say, are you out of your mind? You weren't really driving. I was driving. I was letting you pretend that you were driving. But in his mind, he's thinking, I can do this. You ever met a 12-year-old who didn't think they could drive? You ever met a 13-year-old who didn't think that they're being held back? You're probably like that. I could have driven when I was 11, but the law wouldn't let me. Because your parents, they didn't understand your potential. They didn't know that you were like a driving genius. You had to go through all those tasks and get that learner's permit and finally get your license. There's some of you here, you think your parents held you back. Let me tell you, there's some of you here, you still shouldn't have a license. You know, I was in Miami a few days ago, and we spent a couple hours at the pool, and one of my most memorable moments was when this little girl, probably about 2 years old, was just running wide open at the pool. That always makes me nervous that this little kid's gonna slip and fall and do permanent damage to the concrete, and there she was just running. And her mom was frantic. Her mom was frantic, going, stop running right now. Stop running right now. Stop running right now. I want to say, lady, she's not listening. She just kept screaming, and that little girl just running harder. Every time her mom told her to stop, she just went faster. But she didn't look back. She just kept saying, I can swim, I can swim, I can swim. She was running to the other end of the pool to go right in and swim. Her mom was terrified. Her mom was actually in the pool and trying to run in the water to get there before her daughter got there, and she made it just in time and grabbed her daughter, and her daughter was so upset. And I love what she said next. She said, I could swim last year, don't you remember? I'm looking at the little girl and said, last year you were 1. You almost didn't even exist last year. She goes, I could swim last year, don't you remember? I know what's gonna happen. That little girl is gonna grow up in Newport Beach. She's gonna be going to a therapist, saying, the reason I don't know who I am, the reason I've never stepped into my potential is because my mom, she wouldn't let me swim. She kept holding me back. I kept telling her I could do it last year. That little girl doesn't remember anything from last year. But she's gonna be wounded. I could have been an Olympian. Every once in a while I think to myself, you gotta just take that child, just put him in the middle of the pool and just drop him. It's like, okay, you can swim. Maybe you're right. Maybe I'm wrong. I'm only the parent, but you're two. Just let them just do their thing. Then after, 15 or 16 minutes, just like, pick her up, and so, do you still think you can swim? And she'd probably, yes, I could swim last year. There's a reason a parent doesn't let their 2-year-old swim by themselves, is because they can't swim. See, there may be things in your life, and you may be angry with God because he hasn't come through. He's not giving you the keys. He's not letting you jump into the deep waters. You're like, God, why do you keep holding me back? He said, there's a reason. It's because you're underage. It's because you're still an adolescent. It's because you've never chosen to grow up and become an adult and become spiritually mature, so I can't trust you with everything that's actually yours. No one is in a greater hurry for you to grow up than God, because he wants to treat you like an heir. Every day that you don't have to live like a slave is a day well spent for God, because it's all yours. All the promises in the scriptures are yours, but you don't experience them and they don't actualize in your life as long as you're underage. And I've seen it for too long. You see, physically, you eventually grow up. Some of you didn't want to, and some of you were way too much of a hurry. But finally you turned 16, then you turned 18, then you turned 21, and the laws identified you as an adult, even if you really were not emotionally or relationally. And you get the privileges of adulthood, and for some of you, those were some of the most devastating points of freedom in your life because you didn't know how to handle that freedom. But your spiritual journey, it's not about time. See, spiritual maturity is not about time, it's about choice. And how many minutes you've been a follower of Jesus doesn't make you spiritually mature. It's how many choices you've made as a follower of Jesus. And so there's some of you, you've believed in God for 20 years and you've made no progress on your journey. And you don't know why things haven't changed. And it's because you have found the safe space of adolescence. You've realized as long as you stay spiritually mature, you don't have to take on any responsibility. You can always be someone else's responsibility. I know. I wouldn't be applauding either. I think this is more a moment for grimacing, for struggling with this. Are you still where you were last year? Where you were 5 years ago? Where you were 10 years ago? See, that's why you may be a follower of Christ for many, many years, and someone else enters their faith, and they're brand new, and within 2 years, their influence and their maturity and their access to God's presence and their ability to pray and have answers overshadows your life, because maturity is not about how long you've believed, but how deeply you've believed. So are you living like a slave? Because it's time to grow up. It's time to leave adolescence behind. And by the way, that's why we do things like Mosaic College. So we don't do Mosaic College for us. We do Mosaic College because we know there's some of you here in a transitional period in your life, and you need to decide to build into your life. And I hear excuses all the time. Like, I don't have time. I don't have the money. Say, okay, how much of your conversation is the conversation of a 15-year-old? Because 15-year-olds always have excuses for why they don't invest in their own maturity. But when you start taking responsibility for your life, you get what you need. You get where you need to be, and you step into the spaces where you challenge yourself to become the person God created you to be. That's why I do things like Mosaic Conference. Everybody's always asking me, well, why don't we advertise the speakers? I don't like advertising speakers. I'm like, this is not a celebrity show. And it shouldn't be about, oh, I know that person or I like that person. It should be, I want to be at the epicenter of what God's doing, and I want God to see me in that moment and know that I can be used. Then what I do think is funny is a lot of you are just really good pagans. Like, you didn't grow up in church like me. You don't know any Christian celebrities like me. I didn't know any of them. And so when we put people's names up there, they go, who's that? Who's that? Who's that? We realize it doesn't really matter. So don't worry about who it is. Worry about who you want to become. So are you living like a slave? There's some of you right now. You need to decide right now, it's time to grow up. I'm not going to put my maturity in someone else's hands. Whenever someone comes to me and says, okay, how are you going to help me become mature? I go, you're never going to grow up. Because no one else can make you an adult. See, adolescents always want freedom without responsibility. But adults understand that freedom always comes with responsibility. And that responsibility is the path to freedom. And then he goes on, but when the time set had fully come, God sent his son, born of a woman, born under the law, to redeem those under the law. I think it's beautiful how he weaves our journey with the journey of Jesus. He says, by the way, you're living like a slave even though you're an heir. And by the way, You're living like an orphan even though you've been adopted as a daughter and son. And I want you to see this. He says, and so then when the time had fully come, God sent his son. He was born of a woman, born under the law, to redeem those under the law, that we might receive adoption to sonship. He says the part of the reason God did it the way he did it, the reason he sent his son into the world to be born of a virgin, to walk among us, is so that we would know he relates to us the way he relates to his son. That he invites us to be his daughters and sons, to be his family. See, there's some of you who are living like slaves, but there's some of you who are living like orphans. And you don't understand that you've been adopted, that you belong to the family of the creator of the universe. He says that we might receive adoption to sonship and daughtership. Because you are his sons and his daughters, God sent the Spirit of his Son into our hearts. The Spirit who calls out, Abba, Father. That's such a peculiar thing. That he would tell us that God's Spirit is placed in us, that God comes to dwell in us, and that his Spirit then cries out, Abba, Father. We'll go, why would God do that? Why would God put his Spirit in us and then have his Spirit cry out, Abba, Father? It's as if God knows we do not have a language to express the relationship he has just given us. That we would confuse what he's done. That we would always see ourselves either as slaves and he's our master, or as orphans and he's our benevolent provider. It says the heir is subject to guardians and trustees until the time set by his father. What God is trying to tell us is that he never intended for us to live our lives under guardians and trustees. He always intended for us to have a direct, intimate relationship to our Father. You see, everything we do here for you, it's not so that we can stand in between you and God. It's so that no one can ever get in between you and God. Some of you are living like an orphan, and when you're living like a slave, you don't pray for anything because you don't expect that you should ever receive anything. But when you're living like an orphan, you just ask God for the scraps, for the leftovers. You don't get bold enough to ask what a son or a daughter would ask for. Slaves, they just exist, and orphans, they just survive. But God wants to put a Spirit inside of you so that you would have the words to talk to God as your Abba, Father. There's no more intimate word in the Bible than the word Abba. Last week I was out of town, and I just hated that I missed this moment. Because last week, my son Erwin McManus gave his first message here at Mosaic, and it was kind of an amazing moment, so epic. And I wanted to be present, but it was probably good that I wasn't present. Because as we were reflecting and talking about the talk, he said, I spoke on identity. I said, that doesn't surprise me, because every communicator who shares authentically has a life theme. And you'll be able to hear that theme over and over in whatever they talk about. And Aaron was saying, yeah, I think mine's identity. And then he just sort of opened up, and we had one of those, dad to son kind of conversations. And he said, Dad, it's really hard to have an identity being your son. It's really hard to have my own identity because everyone always connects me completely to you. He goes, I love you, and I'm honored to be your son, and we couldn't be more close. But he said, but the truth is it's hard to find my own person, to find my own identity because of who you are. And then as we kept talking, I said, this is the irony, is that I never knew my dad. And I don't know who I am in a huge part because I didn't know who he was. And I always felt that vacuum in my life. And he goes, I think I have my identity crisis because you have an identity crisis. And I said, this is a crazy thing. You are struggling with identity because you have a dad who didn't leave. I am struggling with identity crisis because I have a dad who left. Your identity crisis is because you're identified with me, and my identity crisis is because I'm not identified at all with my dad. Happy Father's Day. Because the reality is that so many of us struggle with our identity in relationship to our fathers. He was either gone or there. He was either a terrible dad or an awesome dad, and you're still struggling. And I have a theory about this. See, I think that the reality is that we all struggle with our identity when it comes to our father, even our mothers, even though we don't say that. You know, every athlete, they win a championship. I want to thank my mom. Or like, hi, Mom. Where are you going? I'm going to Disneyland with my mom. No one says, hey, Dad. Thanks, Dad. Like, what is it? No pro athlete has a dad? As a dad, I'm like, go, we're right here. Like, you know, for half the population. But you see, I think we all struggle with our identity with our parents because we never become fully what they hoped we would be or what we think they wanted us to be. But we don't just struggle with our identity with our fathers and mothers, our parents. We struggle with our identity with our families. We struggle with identity with other human beings. That's why we try so hard to act like we already know who we are. You ever notice how hard we work at being unique and looking the same? Isn't it amazing? Like, I'm just being me. Where'd you get that? We all find our own tribes. Like, I know people who will not walk into certain coffee shops because it will ruin their image. I'm looking right over here in this whole section. Because your identity is wrapped up in going to the right places with the right people. Not you, right? We choose teams. We wear the uniforms of teams that we never play for. They don't pay us anything. We become mobile marketing machines for teams so that we can be identified with them. Can you think about the identity crisis Laker fans have been going through for so many years, living in the past? And the identity crisis Clipper fans have because they have no past to live in. Can you imagine the identity crisis Warrior fans have of the fear that the future cannot be as good as the present? We're all looking for some place to find our identity. But here's the dilemma. See, even if you don't believe in God, here's the dilemma. If we are created by God in his image and likeness, if we were created for a relationship with God, then our core identity can only come from God. And maybe this is why it's never good enough. Maybe that's why it doesn't matter if your father stayed or whether he left, whether your mother stayed or whether she left. Maybe that's why it doesn't matter whether you're a Laker fan or a Clipper fan. It doesn't really matter what you connect yourself to. Isn't it amazing how many secondary things we claim to say who we are? And so we're Republicans and Democrats, we're straight or gay, or we're trans, or we're something else. Isn't it amazing how many things we connect our identity to? I'm Latino, no, I'm Mexican, what am I? How many different things can we connect to try to claim our source of identity until we admit it's not good enough? It doesn't satisfy that deep longing in our soul. And there's a reason for that. It's because the source of your identity is supposed to come in God. And as long as your identity is in anything else, you're living like an orphan. When it first came out, I became a part of like the early participants in what was called 23andMe. It's a DNA research group, and they do things like let you know if you have a high predisposition for addiction to heroin or alcohol, or it's helpful. And it lets you know if you have a predisposition toward Alzheimer's or Parkinson's, or whether you have unique taste buds, or it's crazy the kind of things they can identify. But for me, a huge part of it was I just wanted to know more about who I was because I never knew my dad. So I thought maybe like they can tell me like a little more about who I come from. See, slaves never own anything, but orphans never belong to anyone. And I've realized it's been like a core theme in my life, I just want to know. And with my mom's DNA, her side of the family, I could trace that easier. But with my dad's, even the DNA designation they gave me was so obscure that I can't find us. And so with the World Cup, this organization sent me these updates based on teams qualifying for the World Cup. And so I get one that says, you have ancestors from Brazil. I'm going, Brazilian! You have ancestors in Colombia. Colombiano, que es awesome. I was just in Bogota. It was awesome. You have ancestors in Spain. They didn't mention Italy because they did not qualify. But then it said, you're 24% Portuguese. Like, boom! Ronaldo and me! And I realized I've made a shift in my life. See, for a huge part of my life, I had the mindset of an orphan. I don't belong to anyone. But now that my identity is in Jesus, I belong to everyone. So instead of like going, I don't belong to anyone, I'm like, yep, that nation, that nation, that nation. I'm 8% from like Senegal. And I'm like, boom, Nigeria, Senegal, Black Panther. I knew I was African. I could feel it in my soul. And you see, what you need is the kind of relationship with the creator of the universe where spirit comes to dwell in you, and you hear these words come out of the depth of your soul, Abba, Father, where you're no longer an orphan, but now you're a son and a daughter. This isn't a religion. This isn't a belief system. You are being adopted into a family. I mean, you need to stop for a moment and realize that the creator of the universe is standing right now in front of you saying, I want you. I want to adopt you as my daughter, as my son. I want you to have all the rights and privileges of a son or daughter who was born out of my flesh and blood. I want you to be my inheritance. And he's just waiting for you to say, adopt me. Because I'm done being a slave and I'm done being an orphan. See, when you're living like a slave, it's time to let childish things go and grow up. And when you're living like an orphan, you need to know who you are and you need to speak up. And by the way, if you don't know what it feels like to live like a slave or an orphan, let me just describe it for a moment. If you're here and you're just overwhelmed with anxiety, just anxious all the time, you're anxious about everything, you can't even identify what's causing your anxiety, you're living like a slave and an orphan. Life isn't supposed to be lived like that. You're supposed to be free from that fear and that worry. See, if you're here and you're always depressed, if you're just struggling with depression all the time, and no matter how much good happens in your life, you just can't see the good. All you can see is everything that's going wrong. You're living like a slave and an orphan. There's some of you here, you're stressed out all the time. And you think it's because of your life, your job, your work, your external circumstances. I'm telling you, there are people who are taking on way more than you and they're not stressed. Stress is not the result of your outside circumstances. Stress is the result of your internal world responding to those circumstances. See? And when you're a slave, you're afraid that you're not going to handle it right and you're going to get punished. When you're an orphan, you're afraid you can't handle it alone and no one's going to show up to help you. And if you're here and you're struggling with worry and depression and anxiety and stress and fear and you are paralyzed, I want you to know you can be unchained. You don't have to live with those chains. You don't have to drag them into every relationship you have. You don't have to drag them into every job opportunity. You don't have to drag them into tomorrow. Because some of you, the reason you keep facing a tomorrow that looks like your yesterday is you're dragging your past into your future because you're chained to it. And God wants to break those chains and unchain you and set you free. But only a son and a daughter can step into that kind of freedom. And then in verse 7 he says, you are no longer a slave, but God's child. And since you are his child, I love that. Since you're his child. Since you are his child. It's already happened. This is already real. If you've crossed the line of faith and entrusted your life to Jesus, let me tell you, the moment you say, Jesus, I give you my life, he just rushes into your soul and gives you his life. Since you are his child, God has also made you an heir. You need to let that sink in just for a minute. You are an heir of God. Every promise in the scriptures is now a part of your own inheritance because you are his daughter and son. He doesn't have to upgrade this. He can just say, hey, I died for you. Be glad with that. I rose from the dead. Just stick it out. Suck it up. And deal with your life. He doesn't have to tell you that the promises are yours. He doesn't have to tell you that the inheritance is yours. He doesn't have to promise that you're an heir. He doesn't have to claim you as a son or a daughter. He wants to. So are you living like an heir? Are you receiving what is yours? Because if you need to grow up to stop being a slave, and you need to speak up to stop being an orphan, you need to rise up if you're going to live like an heir. I love what Paul says. He says in 1 Corinthians 13, beginning of verse 11, he says, when I was a child, I talked like a child. I thought like a child. I reasoned like a child. When I became a man, I put the ways of childhood behind me. For now I see only a reflection as in a mirror, but then we shall see face to face. Now I know in part, listen to this. Then I shall know fully, even as I am fully known. See, then it started making sense to me. The reason I wanted to know fully was because I didn't know if I could be fully known. See, the reason I kept searching for my identity, the reason I keep doing all this DNA research, the reason I keep trying to do all this ancestry kind of interconnectedness to get the pieces of what feels so profoundly missing inside of my soul, and that maybe if I could just figure out who I am from all the pieces around me, I can know myself. No, that's not it. Maybe then I can be fully known. See, if you don't even know who you are, how can anyone know who you are? If you don't know yourself, you live in fear and terror that no one will ever fully know you. And if no one can fully know you, no one can ever fully love you. And you live in fear that you'll be disconnected and alone all your life. We know how this love thing works out, right? You got to show them the best you long enough to where they're committed. So that when they see the not so best you and the oh so well hidden you, they're already across that line, the point of no return. Like, I didn't know this about you. And you go, really? I hid it well and on purpose. You know what the most terrifying thing in the world is? You need the person who loves you to know you. And you're terrified that if they know you, they will never love you. Here's the amazing thing with God. He knows you fully. He knows you completely from the beginning. He knows all of your brokenness. He knows all your imperfections. He knows all your sin. He knows all the darkness inside of you. He knows all your fears and doubts. He knows your dreams and hopes. He knows the things about you that you don't even tell yourself because you're afraid to say them in your head, much less out loud. He knows everything about you. He knows you fully and loves you completely. And that's what it means to be a daughter and a son, to be so loved that you are fully known, fully accepted. Because not only does he see who you are, he sees who you were created to become. He sees more than you can see, more than you can know. So I've made a decision. It's a very recent one. I'm gonna start living like an heir again. I found too much slave language in my life. Acting like things are just too big, too much. I'm done with all the orphan language in my life. Asking God for crumbs, expecting too little, thinking that I can exhaust God's generosity. I'm done with that. I'm gonna live like an heir. I'm gonna say, look, I didn't step into this saying I'm a son. I stepped into this saying, God, I'm a mess. See, God, I didn't come into your presence saying I'm a son. I actually came to your presence saying I'm a sinner. I actually came to God's presence saying, I don't know why you want me, but if you want me, I want to be wanted so bad that I'm in. So he decided to call me an heir, so I'm gonna take it on. And I've been thinking about what's happening, and I gotta tell you, I've been, to Sydney and London and Mexico City and Bogota, Colombia, and then Miami, and then home, and I've been all over the world in the past month and a half, and I've been seeing such extraordinary things. And I went to Bogota. I mean, when you think of Colombia, you think like an undeveloped country that really needs our help. And I go to Bogota, and I walk in to speak in a community of faith into a church that had 30,000 people attending. Their building would consume our space over and over and over again. On the Wednesday night that I spoke there, they were doing 2 gatherings, and there were 4,000 people lined up for each gathering waiting to get in. And the pastor said, we can't advertise that you're here because there'd be so many people we couldn't hold them all. What a problem. And I looked at everything they had, it was world class, and I realized, and I started thinking, how is this possible in Bogota? When we're just like struggling and just getting by and just making our way in Los Angeles, and it hit me. We're living like slaves and orphans, and they're living like heirs. And then so I had a moment about a month ago. And we've been, at the Rialto Theatre in South Pasadena. So I just felt like something inside me compelled me, and I sent a letter to the owner. I'm so tired of glorifying being a nomad, being a gypsy, being a transient. For 26 years, we've never bought anything as a church here in LA. I've always just sort of like glorified that and said, that's just us. We're nomads. We just move from rental property to rental property. But there's a mindset there. It's like a slave. Or an orphan. And so I sent an email to the owner of the Rialto through our realtor, and I said, we want to buy your building. They've only owned it for 2 years. They didn't express any interest in selling, but I thought, why not ask? Because if we're there, maybe it's supposed to be ours. After all, the whole estate is ours. So we sent an email, and I get an email response like the next day. He says, I want this much money. So that meant he's open to selling. The amount wasn't as important to me as the fact that he was willing to sell it. That was really high, a lot of money. So we sent an email back going, we'd like to pay this much. This is what you do in negotiations. And then he emailed back and said, no, this much. He didn't go down 1 penny. Said, okay, we're gonna buy that building. Because there should be a church there called Mosaic impacting that region of the city. But then I thought, we We've been in Hollywood for 7 years and we're perpetual renters. They don't even want us here. Half the time it's such a hassle. But the people who bought this building, they can't build on it. They're having so many problems with Hollywood. So 7 years we've been here. It was month to month for years, waiting for them to tear it down to put condominiums, but the city won't let them, and they're fighting it, and they're trying to figure out a way to do it. And so I thought, I got that guy's email, the owner. So he lives in New York, so I found his email, and I sent him an email. Here are a few thoughts I have. And we'd like to buy your building. We want to take the building and make it Mosaics and make it a permanent place for our church. And he responded within 3 minutes. This is a multi-billionaire, a busy guy. Responds himself, not his assistant, not his associate, not his realtor. He responds instantly and says, well, you're making me mull over quite a few things, and I'm chewing on this. And he goes, but let me ask you so I don't spin my wheels. Can your church really afford to buy this property? And he sent me that. I had a moment of reflection. I thought, this is how much it's gonna cost. This is how much we have. And I realized, oh, there I am, acting like a slave, like an orphan. So I sent him an email back. When he said, can your church afford this property? I just responded, yes. You just tell us how much you need. And I just got on a roll. I thought, we should do this, not just for us, because we've proven we don't need to own anything. We're going to do this because 100 years from now, the church needs to be powerful and impossible to ignore. The church needs to be undeniable in our city of Los Angeles. Because there are just too many people who come here so gifted, so talented, so extraordinary, so beautiful, so fragile. And they look so good on the outside, but inside there's so much turmoil, there's despair and anxiety, and there's so many of them who can't even think of one more reason to live one more day. And I'm so tired of some of the most beautiful and gifted and extraordinary people in the world taking their lives because they don't have hope. And I'm telling you, Los Angeles needs what we have to offer. And we're not orphans. And we're not slaves. The entire estate is ours. We're heirs. We're the sons and daughters. And I know there are a lot of you here, you're thinking, well, I can't help do that. I barely have a job. Some of you are like, I'm just struggling. Let me tell you what we need. We need the full measure of your faith. That's what we need. Because God will use us. But he's going to go far beyond us. He's going to do more than we could ever ask or imagine. I talked to this pastor in London. They're just doing extraordinary work, and they started a church in Paris. And I said, how did you start the church in Paris? Did you guys speak French? He goes, no. Did you have people there? Not really, no. So what'd you do? He said, every Saturday morning, our staff here in London, we got on the channel with all of our equipment. We took the channel to Paris. We set up every Saturday night and started a church on Saturday night. And then after the gathering was over, we packed everything up, took the channel back to London and set it up for church on Sunday. I said, how long did you do that for? He goes, 2 years. If they can find people that committed to the mission of Jesus to turn cities upside down, I know we can. But we gotta live like heirs. And then I said, is there anything you would do differently? And this stuck with me. He said, yeah, I wish when we were in Paris, we had bought something. I said, you mean like a church building? He goes, not just something, a condo, a house. He goes, everywhere we go, we buy something to say we are here. We're committed, we're not leaving. And I realized we're on Hollywood Boulevard, and right now we're living like tourists. They're just passing through. And we need to let our city know we're not going anywhere. We're here to stay. But we're gonna go west. I'm telling you, we're gonna buy something on the west side. We're gonna buy something in Mexico City. We want them to know we're here to stay. And this is not normal for me. You ever have like huge faith in certain areas and then like very little faith in certain areas? Like, I have never led us on an insane challenge just to buy every place we rent. I just think it's time for us to stop being slaves and orphans and to see what God will do if we believe him that we're heirs. So I want you right now, if you would I'm gonna ask you to sit back down. I'm gonna ask you just to take a moment and just close your eyes and bow your heads. There's some of you here and you've been living like slaves. You came in with chains, but no one could hear them or see them. You're paralyzed by fear, by anxiety, by depression, by fear. There's some of you here, you're living like slaves. And Jesus wants to break those chains and let you leave unchained tonight. So I'm gonna ask you right now, if you would say, I've been living like a slave and I need to own my identity, that I'm an heir, I'm a son, I'm a daughter of God. If you wanna be this honest, I wanna pray for you. If you'd say, I came in like a slave, but I'm gonna leave free. I'm gonna leave unchained. I want you to stand if that's you. If that's you, you say, man, I'm so done being a slave. I'm so done just existing. I'm done surviving. I'm done living in fear of God. I'm done worrying about getting everything right and everything I've done wrong. I'm just done with feeling judged and condemned. I'm done of being controlled by guilt and shame. I just want to know God as my Father, not simply as my master. If that's you, I just want you to stand right now. I want to pray for you. Beautiful all over the room. So good. This is for you. I want you to stand because you're free. I want you to stand in that freedom right now. I want you to stand in your emancipation. When you stand, I want you to hear those chains break right now. I want you to stand and know that you are unchained in this moment. Beautiful. People are still standing. I know it takes time because when you've been a slave, you don't know that you have the power to be free and be a son and daughter. There's some of you, you've been living like orphans. You've never believed you belonged. You've just never known who you are because you've been trying to put your identity in other things rather than in Jesus. And right now, you need to stop being an orphan and you need to be adopted. Right now, you need to embrace your adoption and say, yes, I belong. I belong to Jesus. I belong to this community. I belong. If that's you and you've been living like an orphan, I want you to stand right now and receive your adoption right now. I just want you to stand and receive your adoption right now. Beautiful, beautiful all over the room. Receive your adoption. Receive your adoption. I want you to hear me declare this over your life. You are a son of God. You are a daughter of God. You are an heir of God's generosity, of his graciousness, of his abundance, so that you can be used by God to do extraordinary things for others. Anyone else right now just need to stand. Receive your adoption. Leave the orphan behind. Father, I want to thank you for all these men and women who've stood in this moment, leaving their adolescence behind and moving into their maturity in faith, receiving their inheritance, embracing their responsibility, living in their freedom. I pray, Jesus, that your Spirit would right now declare in their souls, Abba, Father, that they would hear you cry out from within them, Abba, Father, that they would know who they are to you. Who they are to you. We declare their freedom. The chains are broken. They are unchained. They are free. They are free. Would we just take a moment? Can we just celebrate everyone who stood in this moment right now? You guys can have a seat right back down. Thank you so much. Amen. Amen. So beautiful, so good. I know we've been here for a while. I was pretty sure I wasn't going to go over an hour, but I did. But I think this is an important moment for all of us. I know it's an important moment for me. I feel the freedom happening inside of me. And if I need to be free, I'm pretty sure you do too. There's some of you here, you haven't crossed that line of faith yet. You haven't given your life to Jesus. You haven't trusted him with your life. And I just try to lead people in one simple prayer, just one sentence. Jesus, I give you my life. It's not everything you and God have to talk about, but you're gonna have a conversation with God that lasts forever. But right now, there's some of you, and you need to begin this relationship with Jesus. You need to become his son and daughter right now. Jesus gave his life for you. He's just waiting for you to give your life to him. So right now, would you just whisper to him, Jesus, I give you my life. If this is your moment, if this is the moment you're gonna cross the line of faith and give your life to him, I want you to just embrace this moment right now and just whisper this prayer, Jesus, I give you my life. Right now, just whisper to him, Jesus, I give you my life. Jesus, I give you my life. Now, I'm not gonna ask you to stand, but I am gonna ask you if you would, if you just prayed this prayer, Jesus, I give you my life, I just want you to hold your hand up high because I wanna pray for you really quickly. If that's you, beautiful. Anyone else right now? Beautiful. If you just whispered this prayer, Jesus, I give you my life. If this is your moment, just raise your hand. I wanna see you. Wherever you are, wonderful. Anyone else? Jesus, I give you my life. Anyone else right now? He loves you, he wants you. He died for you. This is your moment. Jesus, I give you my life. Anyone else right now? Father, I thank you for those in this moment. Just open up their hearts to you who whispered this prayer. I pray, God, that in this moment they would know they belong to you, that you will never leave them or abandon them, that they are your sons and your daughters. And I pray, God, you would grow them to maturity so fast that they would experience the full benefit of your inheritance. We thank you, Father, and we pray in Jesus' name. Amen. Can we just thank God for everything he's doing in everyone's life right now? So good, so beautiful. What would it look like if all of us stopped living like slaves and stopped living like orphans? What would it look like if all of us moved together as a tribe of sons and daughters who step into the full inheritance of God in our lives? Imagine how much good we could do in the world. Wouldn't it be great if you were like the Prince of Saudi Arabia and you decided to solve problems like poverty and injustice or housing? He does not have what you have. You are a son and daughter of the creator of the universe. Receive your inheritance and watch the world around you be transformed. Let's all stand together.